That tense moment. Hello and welcome to an evening with Comrades. Tonight we have with us Pac-Man.
Nuke the whale, save the planet.
We also have with us Eugene.
Hello, everyone.
We also have with us Galatix.
Good morning, everyone. No,
We have
good
joining-
afternoon, actually.
We have joining us from the United States of get the fuck out of there, socialism or barbarism.
It is 6:30 a.m. right now where I am.
Good lord. Joining us later will be Goulash Guy, and I will be your host, TK Jones, with subpar audio because I'm on my phone. Tonight, leading us first will be Pac-Man telling us about the conspiracy theory power hour on 4chan after the Trump Tower fire. Don't forget to like and subscribe and go to easternmarshlands.com for everything Eastern Marshland. Lads, how are we?
Okay, so as far as I can work out, anyway, I'm going to do a quick plug for some comrades of mine in the Chamber Marxist Party, an online mock parliament. I'm just going to do a quick plug for them here because it's thanks to them that I was able to be introduced to the wonders of this thread. A friend of mine by the name of Commissar Unoriginal is his screen name. You'll see him around. He was lurking on poll after I told him about the Trump Tower fire. I was like, I wonder what those fuckwits think of this. And he's like, well, let's go look, shall we? So we went digging. And oh my god.
You had
I did-
yourself a fabulous time?
Oh, I made a video out of what I saw, but I
How? I mean, I'm sure we all knew that there was going to be some that there were going to be some creative ideas that they were going to come up with.
really
Was it worse or better than you were anticipating? I
Well-
think is the
you see, I thought that it was going to be more Alex Jonesian in its sort of perception of the situation. Like, I thought it was going to be like, oh, get cut, soy boys.
A lot of it just came out to be where there's smoke, there's Jews.
Yeah, pretty much. Although you could probably take that out of really bad context, TK. You might want to rephrase that just a little. But
They were saying that. They were saying that on 4chan.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing was, at first it was just the International Jewish Conspiracy, which was pretty standard. Then it was Mossad trying to strong-arm Trump into committing to Syria. Then it was Antifa collaborating with the Mexican janitors inside the building.
The janitors. It's always the goddamn janitors, isn't it?
Yeah, there was one guy who said it was Mexican drug cartels. One guy thought that it is actually not some grand conspiracy. I won't use the actual terminology, but to use the politically correct terms, it was just a black person doing black person things. I'm sure it doesn't take much imagination to wonder what the real words they used were.
well. Did you see the Fantastic Four reboot? The Human Torch just played by a black dude in that movie.
Yeah, that was certainly an interesting development. But what's really funny is when one of the residents, who, let's be honest, if you are bougie enough to live in Trump Tower, I guess I don't really have much sympathy. But what was really, really
It's an
funny?
actual apartment. I thought it was like a business building. Like,
No, it's
Trump
an
and
apartment.
business. He has to have some kind of competency. How do you think he makes his money? He's got people living in there.
Yeah, like it was actually a guy living in his apartment, and apparently he is. It was sort of like, okay, what is this? What's going on? And it's like, well, here's the story. A man has been killed. Oh no, a glorious soldier of the Trump army is gone. Oh no. And then suddenly, oh wait a minute. He was declared bankrupt, and it's suggested that he started the fire. Why? Oh, because he voted for Obama. It's the liberal conspiracy, boys. It's the liberal conspiracy.
It's
It was.
Jacobins making a grand comeback in the radical liberal action.
Yeah, actually, no, that was Glatix. What was that theory you proposed a while back? It was that Napoleon was actually a trot because it's permanent Jacobin revolution.
I mean, he did effectively spread liberalism to Europe in some way.
That's right,
Yes,
ladies
and
and
it spread
gentlemen.
it to Russia.
That's
It
right.
was a very contributed to spread of liberal ideology to Russia, especially. We even had a very unsuccessful rebellion on the territories of Russian Empire due to people seeing liberalism and what it is. Yes,
Napoleon was
Napoleon is
Trotsky,
the
then who was like? If Napoleon was Trotsky, then who was the Stalin of that scenario?
Robespierre.
Maybe.
yes, yeah.
I don't know. Maybe.
Liberalism in one country.
Wait, hang on. If Robespierre is Stalin and Napoleon is Trotsky, does that make? Holy shit! That would make Talleyrand Vyacheslav Molotov. Talleyrand is way smarter than Molotov. I'm sorry. Fuck that noise. How do we get from Trump Tower to Napoleon? Actually, when you think about it, it makes a lot of sense, considering their personalities. Let's
The
be
Jacobins attacked Trump Tower.
No, don't compare Trump to Napoleon. That would imply Trump is sane, mentally sane.
Good point. Good point. We also have Left Review in the chat saying, "What if Trump is a crypto accelerationist?"
Oh my boy.
Oh, I remember
I
funny conspiracy theory.
I
Fucking how do you say it? The Republican Party is actually a crypto communist party
Crypto.
because of its origins
That is,
with
that is some next level fucking entryism, dude.
it's a very well thought out theory, you know. But it also has to imply that Russia is still communist, unfortunately.
I mean, didn't a lot of American Trotskyists became conservative?
Exactly, and the founder, basically the first leader of the Republican Party, Lincoln, was casually chatting with Karl Marx, you know, and getting some weird ideas about the origins of capital being originated from labor and not the other way around. You know, it's very weird, and it implies that actually the legitimate Comrades was the color of the Republican Party. Can you remind me?
Oh shit!
Red. You want to know a funny
Illuminati
anecdote
confirmed.
about communists becoming conservative? Because while in the US, Trotskyists became conservative, in France, it's the Maoists that became conservative.
Why though?
I know, like, this is the thing that really gets me. I mean, like, if you want to see the march of modern Trotskyism into liberalism, you only have to look at what happened in the early 1940 before Trotsky was killed. When Stalin invaded Finland, Trotsky came out in support of Stalin's actions, and half his followers were like, "Oh my God, what are you doing?" And he's just like, "Yeah, look,
It's kind of cool, I guess.
yeah,
Well,
look,
I mean, Pac-Man, I think it was you that once explained it, where the only difference between Stalin and Trotsky was their opinion on each other, because Trotsky was pretty authoritarian.
Trotsky was pretty much a more aggressive version of Stalin.
Yeah, this is what I sort of find hilarious. It's kind of like, you know, I don't know how to put it exactly, but you see,
Between the two, Stalin was the moderate.
yeah, he was, and that's the thing. Like, like, you know, I know my friend from the CMP and I are actually having a discussion about that. We were like, the difference between Trotsky and Stalin is, Stalin, we have democratically centralized gulags and mass executions. Trotsky, we have democratically Soviet organized gulags and mass executions. We have decentralized gulags and mass executions. But yeah, I think Trotsky has the problem of being a fanatical idealist. I think, like, you can look at Stalin as, like, incredibly paranoid. He just shoots anyone who he thinks might be a threat.
I think a good analysis of Stalin is say is Machiavellian. That's
Yeah, but Machiavellian implies that there was some rhyme or reason to his actions. Like for the most part, yeah, but I think he just got steadily more trigger happy. But that's an old meme. But I think the big difference is like between Stalin and Trotsky is that Trotsky is just it'd get to a point where Trotsky would literally just roll tanks over the border the moment he could get away with it. Like literally. Like he wouldn't like. Ironically, Trotsky is probably a bigger tanky than tankies in a lot of ways.
He would have broken the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact.
He wouldn't
wouldn't
even
even
signed it
have
in the
signed it.
first in the first
He
place.
would have tried to invade Germany through Poland in 1933.
I think there was a plan to actually invade Poland and Germany and like steamroll, like go to war.
It was Stalin plan A, but it wanted to do it by allying France and Britain.
Speaking
Yeah.
of like tankies and whatnot, and 4chan as being conspiracy theory nuts, why is there this in the media as well in America? Why are they calling Trump a tanky or a communist or stuff like that?
Because liberalism, basically, like the liberals
Because
in this
Putin
country,
is Russian.
the Democratic Party, and just liberals in general in this country, they have this massive fucking phobia of like populism, basically, and like they'll just compare him to like any well-known
to be quite
authoritarian
frank-
leader. Like they'll compare him to Hitler all the time. They compare him to Stalin and shit like that. But I've seen them compare him to Mao. It's literally just it's extremely reflexive, just fear of any type of
I've
like
seen-
populist movement.
Yes. I think I've seen one of the newspapers referring to Trump's populism as the Bolshevik tactics, which
Oh,
made me
Jesus.
odd. And it's like, oh my god, the poor people around him together and doing something. Oh shit, I guess it's the communism hours. I hope one day they won't be wrong on this regard, but for now it's just like right-wing fucking populism and Trump running around being rich.
That
Like-
I don't know. That's what I was saying. I have actually. I'll get into story time in a minute. But no, as I said last week, I was sort of thinking to myself, the only way I'm going to realize my dream for a pan-galactic utopia of socialism is if Trump or Xi Jinping just suddenly decide during this trade war debacle at any time to be like, right, we're crashing it. We don't care. We're doing it right now. Inflating world currency.
That's a lovely economy you have right there. It'd be a shame if it fucking shit itself. Pulls
We're
one
gonna-
lever.
Didn't Xi
Don't-
just
don't you
announce
mean-
recently that he's going to try
don't
to
you-
open up the Chinese economy to some extent?
Don't you mean
Free market reforms.
Like literally just
Don't
the other day.
Don't you mean the dengist wet dream that Xi Jinping will pull off a mask and say, "Aha! I was actually a communist all along."
Comrade Unruh reliably informs us that they will maintain their promise of socialism by 2030.
Oh
I
yeah,
think what they're
Jason
doing is they're
Unruh.
trying to make it
I
open to like.
remember hearing that Jason Unruh raped and murdered his girlfriend in the 90s.
Probably
He did
a
it
meme.
because his girlfriend was like a dangus.
Yeah,
From what I understand, I think they're trying to make China more open to like foreign investment, but internally, I'm not entirely sure if they're doing more free market type stuff. I could be wrong, but that's just the impression that I got from the initial sort of
The-
Those
announcement.
tariffs.
the red mushroom has it right. He says economic crashes with Chinese characteristics with big finger quotes around it.
that's what I'm saying. I was going to make the same observation. This is quite literally an oxymoron of our modern times. Capitalism with Maoist characteristics. Let's face it.
Well, if you've read On New Democracy, then that's literally not even a joke, to be honest.
I haven't, but thank you for tipping me off. Now I don't
You
want to.
should. It's literally just capitalism with Maoist characteristics on New Democracy. It's a giant fucking name.
Chinese NAP, basically.
Pardon?
Oh, any Chinese MEP, I think he said.
No, it's worse than the NEP. Like he calls
It's
it like
basically
a joint.
Chinese.
New Democracy is worse than the NEP. Like he called it like a joint dictatorship of the revolutionary classes, which was the biggest meme I've ever read from like actually serious theory.
So he wants to take the class divisions that's causing all these problems and solve it by adding more class divisions.
Well, his logic is that like China was like this semi-feudal country that was also kind of occupied by foreign powers. So his logic was, the bourgeoisie, workers, and peasants allied to get rid of the feudalists and the Japs. And like after that, we'll somehow basically just skip a step of historical development, create this like joint dictatorship of the classes, and then we'll just go to socialism after that. And I'm just like, what? Like I'm literally just like my mouth is just agape as I read this.
Accelerationism. It's the only way that makes any sense.
This is my thing. I got into I won't call it a fight. It was more of an absolutely hysterical misunderstanding. As I was mentioning the Chamber Marxist Party at the beginning of the video, I was in a discussion today, and I had someone apparently take my position of facadism 100% seriously.
Oh yeah,
God.
Jay Posada is just a big meme lord. It's all a joke.
No, but seriously, the person who will remain nameless, but anyone who's a member of the party will know who this is. I was barraged by a wall of anti-Trotskyist rhetoric, followed by you're literally memeing and trolling, and you're being reactionary and sectarianism for purporting this ideology around here. You're not being legitimate. And I'm like, okay, so you mean to tell me that someone from Australia coming into your chat and stating that he is going to build socialism by launching the missiles and waiting for aliens, you're going to take this decision 100% seriously?
Well, that's the big conspiracy, is that Australia doesn't actually exist. It's just a bunch of people hired to derail leftist discourse and organizing by pretending to be Australian, coming in and shitposting so hard that nothing can get done.
I 100% believe this theory, just by the way.
Oh, for fuck's sake! I sent him a message. Where is Batco? We need this. We need this to be confirmed. We need evidence. We need the lawyer for the defense.
Pac-Man, no, we're not supposed to reveal it yet.
Well, yeah.
Don't make me unhook my ground harness.
Jesus, yeah, you're right. It is a bit hard hanging upside down, but we will manage. We will manage.
Typing upside down and sending it to the Americans is so hard sometimes.
Speaking of the mock parliament that is going on, TK, I know you're a member of this undercover as well. There was a chat going on in the primary area where all the other ideologies mingle and interact about the imperialist party of this group advocating that we should launch a forcible removal of Assad by Commonwealth forces.
That actually ties into the news that happened, I think, today, where a Russian plane. Sorry, my earphones are making me hard to speak. There was a Russian plane that's circling the coast of Syria while a US warship is sailing towards the Syrian coast. And this type of Russian plane is actually an old Soviet type that's used to detect missile launches.
IL-76A4, to be precise. But that's
yes.
okay.
Didn't it turn out that like the Israelis were behind that missile? Because it's always the kikes again.
It is always the kikes every time.
But didn't it turn out that it was like the Israelis who launched all those missiles or something?
Which missiles are you talking about?
You guys didn't hear I think it was literally like right after a year when Trump did the thing. Like somebody launched a fuck ton of missiles at like a Syrian airbase, and I think a few guys from Hezbollah got killed because of it. And apparently it was the Israelis. Like the Pentagon said, no, we didn't do that.
I know that once again Poll on 4chan went nuts when the supposedly isolationist Trump launched all these missiles, but I didn't think
Yeah, that was hilarious.
they had gone
shit.
so far to say no, it wasn't the Pentagon and Trump, it was actually the Israelis and Mossad that had infiltrated the Pentagon.
That missile attack was fucking hilarious because it was like he literally just did it just to like flex on North Korea. Like everybody forgot about it like the next week when he started flexing on North Korea, and it became,
Yeah.
oh, that's why he did it. Like so obviously in retrospect. Syrian civil war is such a giant fucking meme. I love it.
Funny now, like I was on Twitter like a couple of minutes ago before we went live. There was Paul Joseph Watson retweeting Trump's tweet from 2013, like "Stay out of Syria," because the conservatives are like the reactionary right is now really spooked, because of all like Trump basically preparing for airstrikes, and I was really confused because from what I've read, the reports say that the stock market for all the military-industrial complex corporations is going up like by 0.4%, by 1%, 1.2%. Everybody's getting excited about the coming war in Syria, like America's full engagement. And I was like, dude, why are you so like afraid? Like the free market literally decided that the war is going to happen. And it's great for free market, for American like capitalism. It would be really profitable. But for some reason, Paul Joseph Watson, again, a socialist that he is, backs out of the war, like starts to don't say it's like wait for the.
That's because he's part of like the new breed. He's like part of the new breed of conservatives because like people like John
The
McCain
Marxist
and like all
conservatives.
the
Marxist conservatives.
Yeah, he's like part of the new PJW is part of this alt-right new breed of conservatives that we have who are anti-interventionist because all that shit is just so thoroughly discredited in like the eyes of the public these days in the wake of the Iraq War and whatnot. So
It's quite an interesting turn of events that the Republicans are now anti-war.
oh no, they're not anti-war, but PJW is. I don't know if he even considers himself a Republican. I think he's just kind of like a conservative in general. But the Republican Party has not changed.
Is that one of those? Is that one of those Republican in name only kind of candidates?
All hail President Rhino. I don't know, like
Reactionaries are so afraid they want to maintain this sort of isolationism. It's so great. We must be isolationist, while completely contradicting the market economy or how geopolitics work. That's why they enjoy listening to fucking Nazis. Literal Nazis saying, "Yeah, we're isolationist socialists. We're great. We're not internationalists. We're isolationist socialists." The Nazis. That's why they really this sort of rhetoric. And while the people who they claim to support act in their own interest, act in the interest of big business, just as guys like Paul Joseph Watson want them to act, for some reason like start to lose the shit. Like, oh my god, don't invade! It's like that's literally what you wanted. This is what policies you wanted to people to elect, and then they did it. Like, what now? Now you have the thing you have. Like, you have this weird ass fucking Trump president. Republican Party in charge of both fucking cabinets of parliament, and of course they're going to launch the fucking attacks. And
I don't understand how these people can believe that like you can have like this the very idea of being like a quote anti-establishment candidate running for president is kind of ridiculous. I mean, like let's be serious. Like even if like fucking like I don't know, fucking Slavoj Žižek could run for president of the United States, and if he somehow won, he would probably just turn out to be like no better than any other president because that's how the presidency works, and like these dumbasses don't understand that.
well,
yeah, it's the kinds of people that are railing against the government, saying that they'll never be able to do this and they'll never be able to do that. A lot of them don't talk about how they themselves would do things, mainly because they're entertainers. They're on Twitter. They're on YouTube. The way they get their media out is by railing against the government. If they become the government, then there's nothing to critique. There's nothing to make jokes about. There's nothing to be against. So the worst thing that an anti-establishment person can do is to become the establishment. And we can see this with
Yeah.
Trump and everybody and all of the pundits that supported Trump, and now that Trump's in, haven't got much to do now that Trump's in.
This
Yeah,
is
that's
why.
that's the great spectacle of like just sort of bourgeois politics in general. When you start off like being, you know, being like this anti-establishment thing, you're railing against the man. But then when like your guy gets elected, you're basically just become like, an unpaid PR firm for that guy, just
All I
debunking lids.
I must remind you of the Daily Show and the fucking Jon Stewart and all of this shit. You're like, they were all like, yes, the fucking George Bush, like fucking jingoist. What the fuck? The war so bad, anti-war. And they were like, yes, we must support the Democratic Party. They're the ones who must stop the atrocities and the craziness of the fucking Bush era. And then Obama came and did more, like killed more fucking foreigners than Bush ever did. And they did more crazy interventionist shit during the Republican era. And they're like, oh, what up? What's now? What's now? What are we going to do now?
I was going to say it's like in anime when they say you don't get to kill him, only I get to kill you.
Yeah, exactly. And then it's like finding new cause to fight for. Like, hey, look at the blacks around there being killed by the cops. Hey, they have been killing the cop. They have been killing the black people, the blacks. For so long, we must somehow address it. This will be entertaining, and they start giving platform to another cause, another issue that existed before that. All those blacks getting killed by the police. This is atrocity. We must address this now because now we must be distracted from all the things we criticized the previous president for, and address the issue that we have been systemically ignoring for tens of years, like for dozens of years, like just completely ignoring the police brutality, that the issue that hasn't been like solved. It was never solved. It was always there, right? But for some reason, the race question appeared only when liberals started addressing it. This is when we got all the liberal movements, rolling. Because, well, we can't criticize Obama for invading like other countries and droning the fuck out of everyone. No, we must find a new cause. And then they did that. And it's like, it seems, as you said, it is a spectacle. It's the bourgeois spectacle, which is like, on one side, we want to address the issues, but the issues, like, don't really matter because it's all about the spectacle of addressing the question, not really solving it,
Yeah,
Right.
this is the one thing that really gets me about, all the Democrats and soc dems in the United States, going, no war, no war, no war, all this sort of shit. I'm just sort of sitting here thinking to myself, okay, so you've got from memory, besides Reagan's SDI and Grenada, besides that and George Bush and shit, obviously, every single major war that the United States has fought in the past 100 years has been either started or politically backed by a Democratic president.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not backing for the Republicans by any stretch of the mean. The Republicans are fucking pricks. But this whole idea, like, I
Even
can
when
just
the
see...
Republicans did start shit, the Democrats were basically behind it. I mean, they didn't really resist at all. They didn't resist with Iraq or Afghanistan or any of that shit. I'm sure they didn't resist with Grenada.
They voted for Afghanistan. All those people voted to start the war. They were all behind it because it's profitable.
See, I know I'm an Australian on the outside commenting on this, but it just seems as if it ties into the larger problem of there being no real difference between the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, because they'll vote the same so long as it benefits them, and they'll only have slight differences in order to have a voter base.
I mean, all I was going to say is regarding this sort of attitude to reformism, all I can just see is I just in the back of my mind I just see a picture of Rosa smiling smugly to herself, like "told you so." Fucking like seriously, it's just you see these sock dems marching the streets, and to Bernie Sanders' credit, he did vote against Iraq and all the later modus operandi that they went up for. But again, when you have the thing with Bernie Sanders is despite his sock deminess, he's a product of American social democracy. Let's face it. He was the only one who sort of came close to a sort of a genuinely center left position. Even Hillary was pretty much far right by everyone here's standards.
Super
You know what I mean?
predators. Super predators.
And this is what I'm sort of saying, because the moment it was only a sliver, it was a tiny glimpse, but the moment a sliver of class consciousness began to emerge in the Democratic voter base, they shut it down, they attack it, they kill it off quick.
They cheated in the primary.
Oh yeah, flat out.
Like straight up cheated. In who was going to be the Democratic candidate in the general election, the race to get to that position, like Hillary straight up cheated in that. Like I think they even like bragged about cheating in like their email in like her famous email exchanges.
And
Shouldn't this have collapsed the party though? Shouldn't the fact that someone cheat?
I don't even know who the leader of the opposition is at the moment. Do the Democrats even have an opposition at the moment? I don't think they do.
They do. Of course they do. But it's like de jure they do. But they can't really do anything about what is going on.
Like
and they
Trump,
are fucked up, like, by everything, and they try to blame Bernie Sanders for that.
and that's the thing. Didn't Trump and the Republican Party like win like literally every single house, like every single one, almost?
Just about.
They have both houses. They have both houses.
They can pass whatever the fuck they want, and it doesn't matter.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
This is why I keep saying that America is a lost cause, and we have to get as many of our comrades out of America as possible.
On the contrary, now, forgive me, this isn't my Posadas memeing, I'm actually genuinely serious. I think that the heightening contradictions and the degradation of the social conditions in the US might actually make it more fertile from a certain
Yes, and I believe that if we have to do something with America, because, like, millions of American proletariat is not going anywhere. They stay in their work, and they live with the families in the fucking cities and towns. We have to somehow address that still. Evacuation of American proletariat into Mexico will not solve anything, unfortunately, even how grandiose this plan sounds. Because this is a conspiracy theory. It's built to Americans in, not Mexicans out.
I mean, that could, with the Comrades going to Mexico, they could take over the government, assemble an army, and invade the United States.
It's grandiose, it's amazing, but it's not going to work. That's why I believe that the real problem. Yes, I'm sorry.
I mean, if you want a better theory of exodus and comeback, we'll start the communist world on Mars and come back later to invade Earth.
Reverse Posadas.
It's the fourth world.
It's not really reverse Posadism, it's just that Posadas didn't know who would be the alien.
Oh my god, amazing. Yes.
Yes, because by growing up on Mars will be...
Hang on a minute. This basically sounds like the plot of The Expanse. Like Mars is coming back, boys.
Oh god.
Like video game series where there is a quote-unquote authoritarian government on Mars that wants to invade the Earth. But actually it's the Marxist-Leninist state on Mars, global, so to say, Republic of Mars proletariat who wants to destroy Earth imperialism.
Maybe this is like the ultimate conspiracy theory in that the Soviets were actually really, really good at space travel, and they traveled to Mars and they've colonized it, and then the US were like, we're having none of that, nuked it, called it the Red Planet, and keep calling it a barren wasteland, and only let NASA land little robots.
Dope.
Okay, look, you guys. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to put the brakes on here. what you're talking about is nothing less than Posadist revisionism. I'm going to have to ask you fuckers to stop right now.
It's
no,
not revisionism. It's just expanded.
Yes, it's the extension of the theory. It's not revisionism.
that's
It
what
just
they all
turns.
say.
It,
That's
it
what
just,
they all say.
It just turns out we were the alien all along.
Now I
And
can't help but think of that.
Marxism applied to the material conditions of Mars.
I have, on a serious note, thought about American politics, and I want Bobby to take his critical look at my thought. I believe
boy.
that because of elections and what we see happening with Trump and the Republican Party and Democratic Party and how they do the business, for us at least, it has exposed 100% degree things that we already knew as radical left. There is no difference between a right liberal party and a left liberal party. They're liberals, and they have the same agenda, they have the same everything. They're basically the same party. That just has a different voter base, and so they have a different lingo to address the questions. And so, the problem that I see is that American wider public hasn't caught on to that, and even if they did, they don't really see an alternative.
No. Like fucking basically everyone knows that both parties more or less believe the same shit. But the problem is that like the media doesn't talk about that because like there's such like a hegemonic like middle class politics that just has complete control over the discourse in this country. Like if you go talk to like the random person like on the street anywhere, I almost guarantee you like they're pretty well aware that both parties are shit and probably to some extent they're aware that they just believe that they just have the same policies. But it just doesn't matter because it's just such a middle class culture. Again, just complete hegemonic control, just middle class ideas is only what gets talked about in the media.
I believe that, and to end my thought, I believe that it's great for us. It's great for us because I believe that we must, at the moment in America, concentrate on grassroots movements and reformist radical left organizations that could participate in the bourgeois politics. Look at, for example, DSA, and double down on supporting them and building up platforms due to the fact that the task is not to reform capitalism out of existence, but rather to provide an alternative to the two-party system and push for either reform of the two-party system or realization of people that the only way to achieve emancipation is by force, is by forcibly taking it.
The DSA is good for like entryism type shit, in my opinion. And like there are some like local chapters and some of the rank and file are pretty cool, but like overall, I don't think like the DSA is like strong enough of an organization to really have like any major sort of effect.
But that's my point. You didn't disprove my point completely. It is a great entry point, and this is what I believe America needs to do: is to enter, this sort of idea that shit,
okay.
and as well as look, and it is our task to build up DSA or other organizations that we, for example, ourselves develop or create. Our own media, our own basically grassroots movements and organizations that stand in solidarity with other radical left organizations to push for as wide recognition of the movement as possible, to basically address this, to present ourselves as the resolution of this, Republican Democratic dichotomy.
Right.
That's my point. Like, I believe that this is the way forward because I don't see a fucking vanguard being built in America anytime soon, and I don't see any revolutionary potential in America as of yet. I see it is a good start for revolutionary potential in the near future, but like compared to Greece has like tons of anarchists running around blowing shit up, and Greece is not even close to what we could deem revolutionary situation.
Well, would it be possible?
At the point where we have a lot of people, generally there's a sort of increasing popular conception amongst the populace that capitalism just doesn't work. But what we need now is a sort of, I guess, movement to sort of aim and coordinate those feelings, and we haven't really developed that at the moment.
I think
And
you're
really,
right there, because there's a lot of
I think that just
sorry.
applies to like around the world in general. I think that's just sort of the global diagnosis, not just in the United States, but I think it's particularly the case here.
I wanted to add on to that with what you were saying, in that there's a lot of people that understand that capitalism is bad, and capitalism is the cause of all their problems, and they're starting to try to seek out a different option than Republican or Democrat. The trouble is they don't understand the contradictions of capitalism itself. They understand, oh man, like I earn so little and my boss earns so much, but they don't understand the consequences of that. So they're reaching out to the DSA.
On like frustrated fucking alt-right running around because they see the frustration of capitalism. They see the contradictions. They can't realize their identity in capitalism. They don't see the resolution of their political, economic concerns in capitalism. This is the problem. They do realize that. They just don't see the left as the resolution to that. That's why they have to keep on saying that socialism doesn't work, that Marxism is dictatorship, that like and bad tyranny, and they have to keep on this mantra because the capitalism is impossible. Property is impossible, to quote Proudhon. Therefore, everyone feels that, everybody knows that, and the Nazis play on this feeling, and the liberals try to maintain the status quo because say no, everything's chill, but nobody believes them anymore.
We've got
That's the problem. Socialism is the resolution of those problems, and we must think critically of how do we resolve those problems.
This is
actually a very good point. Before I will just connect just for a second to reconnect to the data from the Wi-Fi. I wanted to quickly say that that's actually the problem. This is actually the issue that we must address. It's not how we organize a socialist society, but rather how do we use a socialist instrument, economic and political and social and cultural, to resolve the contradictions. Because as we saw in Soviet Union, patriarchy was still there, racism was still there, the identity question and the national question was still there. They attempted to do that, but they didn't. And the contradictions of capitalism sort of, maintained. They could be solved. That's the difference between having those contradictions in capitalism and socialism. In socialism, they're solvable. In capitalism, they're not. We must understand how exactly are we going to do it using a property-less, money-less society. That's pretty much, that's what I want to say.
If the nationalist question and the identity question are the sorts of roadblocks that will stop fully being able to get rid of these contradictions in capitalism, then the home of identity politics and the nationalist question, USA, is it even possible in the USA to try to fix capitalism with socialism if those are the roadblocks?
I would say
nationalism I don't think is really a problem because we've always been like civic nationalists because we are a nation of immigrants. Like you could never really like appeal to like some sort of like ethno-nationalism here. And if you notice all like the storm fags and whatever, they're all about like building a white ethno-state more than like celebrating America. That's why all the like like the America fuck yeah people, they always talk about abstract sort of concepts like freedom and like wave the flag around more than like actually kind of like celebrating the culture, I guess. So I don't think nationalism is like really that big of a barrier because no one really cares in this country.
Well, I was sort of operating under the theory of class analysis in the United States regarding IDPOL, which has gotten me into a lot of fights with a lot of very motivated people, shall we say. Anyway, the point is, it's not a coincidence that the class system in the United States has operated along racial lines since its inception. It was inherently founded on a slave state, and even though, like in constant liberal fashion, you have constant liberal reforms, but the material conditions of that slave state still exist. It's just simply that it's just been transposed one on top of another. The only ethnic group to really break out of this sort of system would be Asian Americans, and even then, the contradictions of capitalism in that demographic in the United States is even more alarming, because you have them in the middle class, and you have either incredibly rich Asian families or incredibly poor ones.
I'm going to say the situation of the left in America is mostly due because in terms of reformism, America is behind most of the entirety of the first world.
I would actually say that South Africa might be a bit worse.
Yeah, but America is among the bottom three, most likely.
The
If
bottom
you count
three would probably be Australia, the United States, and South Africa, I would be honest, in that regard. And even then, I would say we're the top of those three in terms of some sort of reform due to Medicare and stuff like that.
Yeah, because it's a bit harder to have people focus on more capitalist problem when they don't even have healthcare or they can't go 5 meters without getting shot.
Yeah, in my opinion, also, unfortunately, I agree with Zizek that we cannot, unfortunately, in the 21st century, go back to the 20th century social democracy.
No, we can't.
Like, we are facing the point where it's basically either keeping what we have now or losing it all. So we cannot operate under those pre-assumptions that we could implement first some social democratic shit so that we could have a stable-ish society, stable-ish working class. I believe it's, a more, should I say, well, yes, radical approach to that. A radical approach, a radical stance, We must start with a radical stance and then work from that. Even because America is just as a lost cause as any European country or any third world country. I don't see much difference in terms of how fucked everything is,
No, I'm just saying it's just more harder to create leftist class consciousness as opposed to social democratic or liberal consciousness.
Oh, that's temporary. That's fucking temporary. America's going down the spiral. Just as Australia and everyone else were fucking it out. And
in my opinion, the sooner
it doesn't really help that it doesn't help that the American left, like the actual American left, for the past 50 to 60 years has been completely fucking autistic. Like, it just kind of left like a sour taste in people's mouths. Like, what's a good example? Like, most of the new left throughout the 60s and 70s was kind of shit, in my opinion. I mean, they did raise some interesting like points, but overall they just kind of like forgot sort of the class analysis and ultimately just kind of alienated the working class. And that was just more or less been like a tradition for the left in this country ever since. Like, it set this god awful precedent that we just cannot shake for some reason. Like, we went from shit from like Eugene Debs and like, the mine wars, and then 50 years later, now we have shit like the CPUSA and fucking Jill Stein and like all of that dumb shit like that.
Yeah, you know why? I believe that there is a reason for that, and it is that since the arrival of mass communication in the 50s, and like mass implementation of such things as radio and television, there is no legitimate, there was no legitimate class-centered movement, because it is literally the capitalist ideology that stops the working class from realizing the contradictions, seeing capitalism as the enemy. Like, that's why it all comes down to this. The biggest force in the modern capitalism is not social democracy, reformism, SOGDEMs. Those are not the main enemies. It's still it's just the tankies that keep saying that, oh, the SOGDEMs are social fascists. No, it's irrelevant. Those guys are irrelevant at this point. it is literally ideology. And
Well, the
I
point
have no
was
idea.
like a lot of a point.
Yes.
The thing with like what happened with the New Left, they're not just here. They had a big problem with this in Germany as well. At the same time, like they got like way too into like countercultural shit, and they lost sort of touch with the workers themselves. And I hate to bring this up all the time, but again, it's because like those left movements of the '60s and '70s were largely pretty petty bourgeois. They were like middle class students and like young professionals
Uh,
making those up.
the funny thing is, in France, in the 60s, the petty bourgeois allied with the worker and the students. But I think the new left is a temporary phase. It's basically the old people are starting again to work with workers. The new left was
New Left,
temp-
the New
is
Left
a
was
temporary.
largely a mistake, in my opinion. I think a lot of it. They did have some like interesting. Not it. They did have some good takes regarding sort of the shortcomings within the labor movement regarding identity politics at the time. Like yeah, like a lot of the labor movement was unable. They had shortcomings, sort of getting
As, as
over
soon
that
as
sort of
as soon
hegemonic
as you get
cultural opinions of the time. But like other
as
than that, the New Left was just fucking awful. Just to be honest. I mean,
as I mean, the new left is a stage that every capitalist country has to go through. You
Yeah,
just
and I believe
you
yes,
just need
please.
to you just need to give them their social right, and they will die out and return to the anti-capitalist left. It's just a necessary step, I think, in my
Maybe,
opinion.
maybe, and also I must point out uh, the problem. I believe is not that they went too hard into counterculture, but that counterculture wasn't popular. It's like you may write your nice poems, do slam fucking poetry, and run around, making your own music or creating something your own fucking lingo or whatever, right? It's irrelevant, harmful to the left unless it is relatable, A, and B, genuine. Like in my opinion, this is the biggest hurdle. Still think
yeah, and
that the
that was kind of
counterculture
the problem
is
with the
the
that was kind of
only
the
thing
problem
that
with the countercultural movements of those times is that they were neither relatable nor genuine in a lot of ways. I think.
yes, because
Um,
they saw the bullshit. They saw the bullshit in mass media, and they understood that this exact bullshit is the reason why fucking capitalism still exists. Literally, that's the only thing that keeps it alive. Capitalism is a giant spook that is kept by culture and ideology, and the only way
right.
to destroy it is by creating a dual structure, creating an alternative. Unfortunately, this
So
alternative was terrible. I still believe that in 21st century, the key element of a successful world fucking revolution is culture. I just have no fucking idea how to reach that and how do we achieve, such understanding of the processes and how do we create this culture that could combat capitalist culture.
I don't know about so much in that regard. The only part I really have anything to say in that whole thing is regarding the id pol sort of movements in the modern American left, and how I'm just going to say it flat out what I think, in that as long as the current American system of government and the current American material conditions remain, it doesn't matter how much social reform you pass, equality will never be achieved. Simple as that.
Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
that's
I think that's a given. And
nowhere in the world there's even different fucking political systems because America is unique in its way because it still maintains, as we said, the old structure by literally actually using the slaver republic system of government, like Roman Republic. It's still the founding fathers created the system around the Roman Republic because Roman republicanism is the model for a successful and effective slave state. America still uses this system, but even if you don't use it, if you go, further, if you like implement something like Swedish system where they have only one house, they have only, or like Ukraine, single house parliaments, and they have, a different sort of, approach to creation of separation of power. They have more political parties and whatnot. It's still unsuccessful. Still no reforms actually do any good. Like, nothing does any good. That's the point. Like, unfortunately, I still believe that the with identity politics and whatnot, it's still like legitimate concerns. Like, that's why I was never into anti-it bullshit, because I believe that those things are still legitimate. Like, the concerns are still legitimate because the questions are not resolved, and they won't be resolved until we abolish capitalism and find a way to solve it through socialism.
Yeah, but that's the problem with that, though, is that I've noticed this trend recently of sort of I call it neoliberal anti-capitalism, and this is why the DSA just fucking irks me a lot, because it's this general sort of reformist idea. It's a lot of it is reformism, but it's a particular type of reformism. It's this very sort of softening of like the old hardline socialist Marxist sort of talking points. Like a lot of the times you see groups like the DSA or whatnot even use like phrases like capitalism isn't working, etc., etc. It's shit like that. But you know, in terms of like what they actually advocate for, if you read some of their actual programs, it's really like just reforms, but it's not even like that impressive of reforms. It's just like, kind of you know, uh, kind of like softening the sharpest edges of capitalism. It's basically we just want to regulate some of like the most outward and like decadent practices of neoliberalism, but not really like do anything that would like constitute any major changes in the relations of production. And like if you talk to some of these people, like it's not just DSA, it's people like, Salt, who I'm sure you guys are familiar with. There's this weird like if you talk to them people like us who advocate still today that like capitalism needs to be overthrown in like a violent revolution, if you talk to like the DSA or the SOLT people, they'll go like, oh, who has the time for that? You know what I mean? Has anyone else noticed this? It's this particularly strange brand of like, Starbucks anti-capitalism, or it's like, they don't like neoliberalism, but again, like who has the time to actually like be against neoliberalism? It's
Well,
this very strange.
we've
I
reached
must
a
say-
point. We've reached a point in Australia actually where you'll find someone and you'll start talking to them, and they'll be an absolute comrade. But you'll get to a point where you have to try to find out if they're actually willing to take the steps to, well, save us all from capitalism, or if they're just saying that they're just into the aesthetics so that they can get some sort of a job. They're saying, "Oh, I want to be labor because I believe in the workers' movement, but I also just want to be like this undersecretary for someone so I can have a paycheck." Or are they the kind of person that says, "Oh, I'll just work for this Labor MP for a little bit, but as soon as the revolution kicks off, I'm going to grab my rifle and charge up the steps of Parliament."
Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's like you see there's this phenomenon we have in like sort of, the left of the Anglosphere in general, where it's like we have guys who like march down the city square in like V for Vendetta mask with like banners with like red banners that say capitalism isn't working. But right after that, they go to Starbucks and like they say, "Oh, like a violent revolution. Oh no, that sounds scary. And who has time for that?" And it's just really kind of like gets under my skin. It's like one of those things where like, okay, it's obviously not like the biggest problem in the world.
Hold on. Sorry, Eugene,
Hello?
you weren't coming through properly.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay, I was saying that it's exactly what I was saying about the sort of, the social democracy will no longer work. That before that, there was this idea in the lab that, oh, wait a second, we must implement the reforms first, so that it will soften, like, it will basically make the suffering a bit less, like, will decrease the amount of suffering. Therefore, this will create a platform for a wide uprising, wide, change.
And just by the way to the people listening, it goes beyond just like, oh, suck dems or pussies, xddddd. No, it's more insidious than that. It's more of like like it's not just me being, leftier than thou. Like there is something more, yeah, like I said, sort of insidious to it, I guess. It's just sort of, it's more just sort of like the sort of unnoticeable implicit conditioning of modern neoliberalism seeping into movements that oppose it, even, you know?
Yes, like as I was saying, basically, it is this old idea that is irrelevant by now. And we haven't realized that it is irrelevant to the fullest extent. Even us, people who deem ourselves to be, to be free of this sort of idea, of those ideas. Like the reform, the social democratic reform, is impossible. Like literally impossible. Even if you push through anything, this won't give you any upper hand in the next step, in the following action. Like supporting the fucking Jeremy Corbyn is a fun thing to do, because you're like, hey, if this will be done, if his plan goes through, if the left wing of the Labour Party wins, and we could push for stuff that they propose, we will have a better chance. We will have a more success. This is such an old idea that was here since like 100 years already. And we must accept that it is impossible, that we must not rely on those reforms to help the movement. It's impossible. Literally. Like, we will never have an old, center-left, center-right dichotomy where we will critically support the center-left and then push for, demonstrations, strikes, and attempt to, do some radical action. No, it's silly to assume that. This won't happen because it never actually happened. Unless, in the, how do I say it, like in the last years.
I had a conversation with somebody about this the other day. I told him, we're at the point now in our politics where even for like just sort of non-systemic sort of like reforms, things like higher wages and whatnot, we're gonna probably have to do like some pretty hardcore shit just to get even those done at this point. Because like we live in an era of sort of what Viktor Orban describes as illiberal democracies, which is sort of the historical analogs to that would be like, Finland under Mannerheim, or like maybe Germany under Kaiser Wilhelm. Those sort of things that like have the visual sort of outwardly sort of the trappings of like liberal democracy. And modern times we have, of course, Orban and Putin in Russia, now the United States, and increasingly Britain. Just sort of, they technically are liberal democracies, but like those liberal democracies are kind of like rigged, basically. So we have just like, prime ministers and shit who are in power for increasingly long periods of time, and like there's basically any sort of like legal means just aren't going to get anything done anymore.
Not even legal means. It's more of, I believe, an issue with an old assumption that the left in the country is actually left. Like, even if it has people who are that are class conscious and they attempt to do something, you are using a very wrong framework in the times of neoliberalism. Like, this is a wrong approach, like 100% wrong. And unfortunately, when you attempt, like, just to take yourself, when you attempt to argue with those people and talk to them, they're like, no. We are on the right path to destruction of capitalism, actually. This is exactly the way to go forward. It's a complete delusional left. This is the delusional left, as I will be referring to it from now on.
I mean, it's just like
you must build structures that are completely detached from the government. You must build independent parties and social movements that are completely separate from that, or you will just face that you won't be able to pass, and then congratulate yourself, congratulate each other, and clap and like, yay, we succeeded, we did a thing.
There's a hilarious I don't know what it is. I guess you could. It's a video of somebody describing reading something that he had written, and it's like what if Star Wars, like it's Star Wars, but instead of like it's Star Wars, but what if it was what if the rebels were like non-violent pacifists basically? And like of course they do a bunch of like, uh resistance against it, and of course it accomplishes nothing. And at the end of it, it's like the rebels nonviolent movement gets like, a mention at like the very last page of the newspaper, and they're like and they're celebrating this. It's like, oh wow, we got some publicity. And of course, the Empire's plans go unhindered. And maybe that's exaggeration, but I think it's kind of the same idea. Where like any like legitimate or like respectable means of politicking today just are not going to bear any fruit. Like it's just not really how the society we're living in. And by the way, that's how like historical progress has been made. Like that's how we got, the 8-hour day and to some extent the civil rights movement and all those things. Like these weren't like, quote legitimate movements. Like they did some pretty like hardcore shit. And we're gonna need to go back to that to get just even like the most basic reforms done nowadays, let alone actually like, changing the system of production and whatnot.
Yeah, I believe that there's one sentence that I just made up that could be like an example of what we are talking about right now for people at home. We used to believe that radical politics are not done in the parliaments, they are done in the streets. But now we must assume that all politics are done in the streets, not only the radical ones. It's literally impossible to do anything in the current conditions. Literally.
All aboard the acceleration train.
Yeah. Here's what else.
Acceleration train. But in the streets, creating politics in the streets. Whatever politics.
Here's what I'll add on to that. The problem with trying to have a mass movement in the streets is what my local trades hall secretary actually stated to me, and it's very true. When you try to gather people together in order to make a change, a big change, a little change, no matter what, you'll have people in the streets, on the steps of Parliament, on the steps of the White House, with megaphones, hundreds of thousands of people. Well, okay, maybe not hundreds of thousands, like 1,000 people calling for a change in a document. And if it's not done that day, people will give up, go home, and then the 24-hour news cycle will just bury it. If we want to actually make proper change and not just liberal band-aids, but actual like fixing the contradictions of capital, we need like 12 days of occupation on those goddamn steps of Parliament and massive like 100-day general strikes that cripple the economy until we can we actually have to take steps towards maintaining our anger rather than having a small demonstration and then having it fizzle out, mainly because these demonstrations are manned by people who are mostly liberals, I guess.
And that's the problem with the Occupy movement. That's why the Occupy movement fell flat. It was just liberalism. It just gave up and went home. Didn't gain any steam. The Occupy movement was like I remember sort of looking at it at the time as a relatively liberal person at the time, and I honestly thought I wasn't radicalized yet. I honestly thought you fuckers aren't going to achieve anything.
Yeah.
You're sitting out there having a whinge.
See, I got really excited that something finally was happening, and I thought, yes, this was even before I got all radicalized. I thought, yes, the Occupy movement have gathered. They're sitting there. They're actually staying there. Now the next step is well, I don't quite know what it is, but it's more than what they're doing now. The only trouble is they just sort of fizzled out. They gathered, they got angry, and then they whinged, and then that was it.
I suppose.
Where's preparing for the long haul? Where's yeah, as an example, doing what they did in Ukraine, setting up porta potties, setting up tents, actually saying, no, we actually want change, we're not leaving. And then once they were kicked out, going back to where they were kicked out and reoccupying it. I didn't see any of that. I just, like you said, Pac-Man, just a bunch of people whining for a bit and then getting kicked out of a small park.
As I said, it's bordergism with a camp chair instead of an armchair. They have enacted bordergism on the sidewalk. But yeah, I don't know. It's just the revolution in Ukraine. The documentary on that's quite interesting, even though it's like a neoliberal freaking centrist revolution to get closer to the EU. You did see a lot of like ANCOMs and stuff out there amongst the protesters in solidarity with them, even though they didn't line up with the agenda. Now, of course, that could, of course,
I
be
think
just
it had more to do with just authority has collapsed, so everyone comes out. Basically, I think that's just kind of,
true.
That's just kind of is what happens.
But they did. But you saw radical communists who were like, cheering it on versus the Berkut and the state. Like, even though it was predominantly a liberal centrist revolution, as you said, as I can say, sorry. But like,
Yeah, and you know why? Because it was the idea that, government disobeys the people for some reason. Government did the thing that no one wanted. Like, they wanted a different resolution of the European, Union agreements. They actually wanted in. And they were like, and there was an idea that, shit, the government sucks. We must actually take control ourselves. We make decisions, not the people in the parliament. This is why the radical left may have been drawn to that. It's like, why the fuck? Like, we must decide. We are the people, The sort of, very liberal idea that the left wing must, and I must underline this, must be first to defend the rights of people for self-determination.
yeah,
The republic in the nature of, the common cause. It is we who are ruling, we are being.
The government the government says to the people, like, you voted us in. That means we get to make decisions for you. And then the people respond, and do you think that gives you power over us?
Yeah, and another point about what was it? This sort of, what is going on and how do we actually, in the streets thing, Bolshevism, whatnot. You know what the fucking Russian government was afraid the most? Which group was repressed the most out of everyone else during the Russian elections? It was the radical leftists who wanted to boycott them, the elections. It's not the people who were cheering on, even the legitimate Marxist left front was saying, yes, we must vote for this candidate. We must support him. We must vote him in. He will be great. He will introduce so many nice reforms for the rights of the proletariat. The first step into achieving the fucking proletarian dictatorship. No, the ones who were sitting at home doing Bolshevism and saying we're not going anywhere were the ones who got their houses broken into, their laptops confiscated.
Guys, I have to go.
The guys. Politics, thank you for appearing.
I think we are at about an hour and 12 minutes. Perhaps we should have our last thoughts and then wrap up.
Let's have Eugene finish his thing.
What?
Eugene, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Oh.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're back.
Yes, I wanted to say that exactly. Like, my finishing thought will be: you should building politics, creating politics in the political sphere is impossible. Literally, despite the fact it's called politics, it's called parliament, it's called political parties. No, I don't think this is where we should look for politics. Politics are done when you sit at home and say, you know what, I'm going to boycott the elections. This is when the fucking, the bourgeois democracy is like, oh, wait a second. We wasted so much fucking money and time to boost, the ratings of this electoral thing we're doing, which gives us legitimacy. And those people are just going to ignore us. Like, this is the illegalism. This is the top, politics, when you just consciously ignoring it. Not unconsciously, but consciously. And I believe this is the approach we must stand on. That's it.
Okay.
Other finishing thoughts?
Well, my only sort of position really is that same thing I've always been saying.
Nuke the whales.
Nuke the whales, save the planet. Yeah. No, in all seriousness, I would like to second that with saying that reformism. I used to sort of go towards reformism, but to be quite frank, I grew out of that pretty fucking quick. I'll be honest. It's sort of come to the conclusion now where the only thing that our participation in parliamentarianism is going to achieve is the spreading of the idea and the concept of class consciousness.
Yeah, and I think
That's
I think that was always kind of like the understanding with reformism back in the day historically. Like I don't think like Rosa and the German Social Democratic Party like ever had any illusions that they were going to win. I think like they were pretty well aware that them running candidates was basically kind of just like glorified propaganda basically. And I think it's the same with like all of these things really.
And now it stopped working because people don't pay attention to this shit. Like, the people don't pay attention to the red politician on TV. He pays attention to a red politician giving him a pamphlet in the street, talking to him. Like, I don't believe that even parliamentary elections are a legitimate propaganda fucking instrument right now. I believe that MLs are delusional to keep doing it. They would do much more work if they would ignore this and dedicate the resources to more grassroots shit. Like, literally.
Ironically enough, I think I'd go further than that. The real political movements that are starting are, quite ironically, right here, right now, on stuff like this, like ground level mass media agitation. Pretty much, that's it. Like,
yeah, hopefully.
They don't want to go up. Like, everyone, do you do what I do whenever you see someone with a clipboard or a pamphlet in the street? You put your headphones in and pretend you're on the phone. You know what I mean?
No, I approach them. I start questioning them if they actually do that. I start to point out inconsistency in the crazy bullshit that they're trying to promote. I'm like, how the fuck are you going to pay for this? And they're like, and that's it. That's all I hear. And I'm like, okay, goodbye. I love this. Because it's usually liberals who approach me and say, hey, yeah, European Union and fucking compensation for like property that was sold off for cheap, like during the 90s. Like, and how are you going to do that? Well, where's the money? Like, it's amazing. I love doing that.
I almost stood up in outrage at the end of. I went to see the film Ready Player One the other day, and I almost stood up in outrage at the end of the movie. Spoilers. Okay, spoiler alert: the guy wins. Let's be honest, we knew that was going to happen. Anyway, but they're like, oh, you will inherit the whole of the great glorious world that we've built here because you won the game or whatever. And I'm just sort of sitting here thinking to myself, like, the moment he stood up, he's like, okay, I'm sharing it amongst my 3 closest friends here so we can run it. I'm like, you bourgeois fuck! I was like ready to stand up and just be like, no, collectivize the video game.
For aristocracy. Go the fuck away. Yes.
Exactly.
MMORPGs belong to the mobs.
Yeah, exactly. Collectively organized World of Warcraft. But yeah,
Subbab, did you have any last thoughts?
Not really. I mean, I think we've kind of more or less covered it.
Alrighty. Well, I guess
let's finish it.
I was one other thing.
I guess it's time to
one thing that I guess I just came into my head that I guess I will sort of talk about just to sort of get my point across. I guess that I was watching Pan's Labyrinth the other day, and afterwards I'm just thinking to myself like Pan's Labyrinth, but it's the DSA version, where like instead of shooting Francoists, the Maquis have like, the first thing we need to do is get money out of politics, and we have like a 10-step program, and if we do all of these in order, these will create the perfect conditions to run a candidate who will promise to nationalize some shit. And
then in 100 years we'll shoot some fascists.
Yeah, exactly. And like, look, I'm not saying that like anything less than like actually being a guerrilla is like unacceptable, but like, come on, like there's got to be something, at least for now, there has to be some sort of like acceptable in between.
Traditional venues have hijacked. We mustn't use them. We don't use them. We do our own shit. Exactly.
Okay, I do
Yeah.
have one.
That's the real disruption. That's real disruption.
I do
Yes.
have one final thought. Seeing as Goulash Guy didn't grace us with his presence today, I would like to let you guys know. I don't know if everyone else had, but he's pretty distraught at the moment that Hungary had a massive right-wing landslide victory
Oh
in their
dear.
elections. Basically, we've got someone just short of Hungarian Nazis now running Hungary at the moment. Immigrants get out,
Oh no, that's nothing new. Like that guy's been in charge for like 10 years. Like that's exactly what I was talking about with illiberal democracy earlier.
Exactly. And all I'm going to say is, you know what? I'll say it one more time, ladies and gentlemen. If he were here today, Khrushchev did nothing wrong. And with that, I'm going to leave on that note.
Fuck. Jesus Christ.
As I said to Goulash the other day, I'm like, so now that the right wing's in charge in Hungary, don't you think it's time for some agricultural reform? Tell me, how do you feel about corn? I hope you like corn, man. Just let me know.
We're gonna be so close to left unity with people marching in the streets. Then you and Goulash will be up the front, and you'll lean over and say, I feel like some corn today. And then you and Goulash are going to split the entire movement right down the middle over that.
And I'm going to enjoy
Fucking
every
hell.
second of it.
The only reason why the radical right has so anti-communist fucking connotations is because of Khrushchev. If it wasn't for him, fucking hell, it would be such a better fucking conditions in Hungary today. Like,
Amen.
my fucking God.
Amen.
Thanks for a mistake, dude. Thanks for a mistake. Go away.
I know.
All right.
I know.
Alrighty. It's
just fun.
it's
I must go
time to
to
wrap
work.
up.
Finish the fucking thing. I must go to work.
Thank you all for coming. And a special thanks to Pac-Man, Eugene, Galactix, Socialism or Barbarism, and apologies to Goulash Guy. I have been your host, TK Jones. Don't forget to like and subscribe us on YouTube and go to easternmarshlands.com for everything Eastern Marshlands. Thank you for joining us, and please join us next time. Good night, everybody.
Bye.
Good night.